All right, so let's jump into ears. Now with ears, we've got, let's see here. We've got a very particular and critical feature to work with. So if I'm thinking of the head, it has this long axis, usually curved, so it has a little bit of life. That's that watery idea. It's also the center line, so it's separating the symmetrical left from right, relatively so. If I get the T with the eyebrow line, it could be the eye line too, but I like the eyebrow line because those eyebrows oftentimes arch. So we got the T of the torso, then all the features are working off that T, off that center line and that eyebrow line. We've got the eyes and all the rest of it, except for the ear. The ear is the only feature that sits on the side of the head. And we talked about this early on when we started drawing the whole head, so I won't get deeply into it. I've got those actually on our Patreon site, those who care about it, but there's other resources to find. But the ear sits there, and not always, but I actually do it always unless I'm trying to do a real true portrait of somebody, which doesn't happen really much anymore. I try and make that ear lay back from lobe to top. Notice the center line goes this way, the ear goes that way. So in the Renaissance, you'll see them aim it forward, but the face goes this way. Here's the neck. Ear, I usually put laid back. I find it more beautiful and it opens up. But you'll find people's ears do that, and sometimes even do this. And the Renaissance will oftentimes make them small, kind of squiggly, odd shapes, and leaning straight up with no lean, or leaning forward, and even crowding. And you can see on this Van Dyke, which may have been what we used last week, I can't remember, this Van Dyke book. You can see this is the same character. Look how high his ears are. Very close. We're just ever so slightly underneath that forehead, I'd say. And the ears are just ever so slightly below the eyebrow line. Here they're radically below, and we're not really underneath that head at all here. Pretty straight on with it. And yet the ears are really low. You'll see ears, even on the greats, go all over the place. Interesting enough, like Watteau, who we've looked at before, I love his drawings. I think he's one of the great figurative artists of all time. And yet you look at his head drawings, and we have quite a few of them, the ears are all over the place oftentimes. They vary quite, not all over the place, but they vary quite a bit in position and sometimes feel out of position. So watch that, because it's out there alone, it's easy to misplace it. But when you get it right, it's giving you the box logic. You're feeling from the temple line and cheekbone and chin and a little bit of the underside of the jaw there. You're feeling, you can feel this beautiful architecture. And of course, the values are going to do, the shading is going to do a ton of work and really help the illusion. But it actually all starts with placing that ear to get the front from the side. And then you can use the boxy skull idea, the rounded skull, the hairstyle, maybe side swept bangs that really show that front to side. But oftentimes the top of the head doesn't do much to help us feel that. So those ears are critical for that. So that's first thing. Make sure that the feature is not just interested in its own needs, but is serving something greater, serving the whole structure of the face. Once we understand that, if we look at the ear without all the detail, and I'll show you some better pictures here in a second. In fact, let me bring this fetching over. We had fetching and Piaget in the last few weeks. Whoever was asking about what I used last week. Again, I can't remember. But here's a fetching now. You can see the ear is just loosely laid in, but again, it's showing that kind of box logic. There's the T of the face, and then the ear, and he's doing a smart thing. He's using a quite specific hairline. To find that ear. And he's using the eyebrows, as I like to do, with Nikolai Fetchin, to show that kind of front of the forehead as opposed to the corner or side of the forehead. And Fetchin's one of the great figurative draftsmen ever. Yeah, he's amazing. I love his work. I'm actually not personally as enamored with his paintings. I think they're lovely, but they're not first class in my mind, world class in that sense in my mind, which only means I don't find anything I want to steal from them. I always define great art as stuff that I can use to make my own craft better. So we've got all that stuff going on, and then again, the ears are down and laying back. Here's the kind of the sideburn area. The ears are laying back here and there. And notice if I lay that in and don't put it in the right place, notice how it just feels wrong real quick. So you want to be careful of that. And vignetting out is part of the problem here. I didn't do a fully structured head, but with whatever info I put in, the eye and the eye socket, the eyebrow line, and the cheekbone, it's a wonderful line of the cheekbone. And then if I go beyond that cheekbone and eyebrow, I notice there's not much distance there. So I'll just kind of break it into smaller pieces to break a big chunk of real estate into smaller, more easily measured bits. And then there's the sideburn area. And so let's dust this back so we can see it. There's a little bit better version of the ear. And notice it's laid back. Notice I can make it more boxy or more rounded or anything in between. If I'm going to make something boxy in a figure, in an organic form, I'm going to draw each side of that boxy area as a curved line, and then I just keep the corners, but I'll do it that way. So that's what I did there. And then every once in a while you can lay in a straight if you want. But I lay it there. And generally when we draw this, we leave this side open because this cheekbone integrates, and these act kind of like wings that separate on the back side and integrate on the front side. Moving through, integrates here, separates there. You can see in the sergeant, the side of the cheek runs right into the ear, and the ear usually comes out a little bit, shows itself. If I can find the one I marked. You can see that the cheek going back, the wings of the ears flare out to the side. They don't go straight back usually. Sometimes they'll pin back, but usually they stick out a little bit. And you can see here, this guy has ears that pin back quite tightly. There's a couple more in here that pin back real strong, and it feels a little funny. Feels like the ears aren't as pronounced as they should be. This is a little bit more than we want, maybe, if we were doing an idealized portrait, but it's wonderful for this character. In fact, you can see the asymmetry. This ear doesn't flare out as much, which happens quite a bit. We have a little asymmetry. I have asymmetry between my eyes. One of my eyes is a little sleepier than the other. His eyebrow is bigger, reduced down. Even the mustache has a certain balance between symmetry and asymmetry. The goatee below is biasing to our right there, and the hair is twisting off that way, not symmetrical. So there's this lovely symmetry, asymmetry going on. But we want it to lay back. And so what I'm going to do then is when I'm drawing the ear, and I want to learn to draw it from all these positions, I want to always, if I can see it, you can hear my kitty meowing. I always want to relate the eyes or the eyebrow line to the ears, to place those so I get the proportion right, so it doesn't feel weird like it was when it was out of place. And so feel how high it is compared to the eyebrow line, or how low it is, or whatever, and how close it comes. Because as we start going behind a figure, the ear is going to get closer and closer to the front of the face. And as we turn towards a front view, the ear is going to get closer and closer to the back of the head or back of the hairstyle. Like so. So we want to pay attention to how far it's going this way or that, and how far it's raising or lowering this way or that, and check that out. And when we get a good eye for that, then we can fairly quickly see, oh, we should have been even closer yet. Like so. So first, getting the placement of that feature in relationship to all the other features, but more importantly to the whole head itself. So oftentimes I'll see how many ears I need to have before I get to the bottom or the top. How many ears forward before I get to the front or the back. And that'll help too. And you'll find the ear tends to sit kind of in the center of the head on profiles. And specifically the front of the ear tends to be about as far from where the nose starts, the root of the nose, to where the back of the head skull is. Pretty close. Not exactly, but pretty close. So it's getting pretty much in the middle this way and in the middle this way, give or take the angle of the head and the ear and stuff. Here we're about an ear away from the bottom of the chin. Here we're an ear and a half or so from the top. But it's kind of in the middle there. So placing that. And then what I do is I think of it as, it can be anything, but I'll think of it as if it's going to be an egg, I'll think of it as a disc. like the slice of a tube, slicing off a tube like a pancake kind of, or a wafer cookie or something like that. And the front of that ear scoops a little bit, but flows right into the side of the face. The back of the ear separates away. So we'll oftentimes see the back of the ear separating if we can see the back of the ear. If we're underneath it, we'll oftentimes see the underside of the earlobe. So whatever shape I'm drawing, I'll draw a little thickness underneath if I'm under it, behind it if I'm behind it, and on top of it if I'm on top. So given that thickness is a little more work, a little more observation, but it quickly establishes it as a structure and how it groups and how it separates from the surrounding face and skull and such. We do it on time. Pretty good. Something's rubbing the microphone. Thank you. It slipped down into my shirt. Hopefully that's a little better. Thanks, Rick. And someone else said it's ASMR. So hopefully it was kind of relaxing, but probably not. Okay, so that's first. And then the other thing is, as we structure this out, as we structure anything out, we want to be aware of the design of life. Life is always in action. That's kind of dying on me. Let me grab that one. It's always changing in some way. And so you don't want to get too repetitive with your design shapes. Repetitive. You don't want to keep it the same very long. You want to make it the same yet different. Every branch of the tree doesn't zigzag this way and that. They're all unique in their zigzags, for example. Life is either growing, evolving, and changing by becoming more active through growth, or changing through decaying and becoming actively giving in, losing energy through entropy. But it's constantly changing. It does not change to stay the same for very long. And notice a curve and a gradation both embody that constantly evolving, changing idea. And you can add levels of change. This is starting darker and getting lighter incrementally, fluidly. But also it's starting out more rendered and getting more hatched, and maybe starting out more tonal and becoming more linear. So it could be evolving in several ways. So that means if I'm drawing, say, the ribs of the rib cage, I wouldn't want the ribs to be the same too much. I wouldn't want them to be equal distance. I wouldn't want them to be the same looping curve. It's not going to look real. It's not going to look interesting. It's boring. You don't want the second 10 minutes of a movie to be almost the same as the first 10 minutes. And then we'll find that happens quite a bit. I read a book that I won't name that they just kept having to find the next thing. And then it was the next thing, and there was the next thing, it was the next thing. It didn't matter what the things were. They were just running around trying to get this next thing they had to have to succeed. And it got repetitive, even though they called the thing a different thing each time. So we want constant change and evolution in our art, as we do in our life. Life becomes, feels like it's in decline if every day is the same, or every day is less of what I had before than the last. So when I draw anything, say the ear, and we can see in this lovely Fetchin drawing, even though it's very light and sketched in, I picked it for that reason, actually, because even at the beginning of this, he built this evolution. Notice that it's this kind of curvature. Let's simplify it. We can think of it as a couple different ways. It could be a C or a reverse C. It could be more chiseled, varied. It can be fatter at the top and skinnier at the bottom. It can be all sorts of evolving. But when he starts picking out the outer rim, right here, and then he picks out the inner rim, right here, and I'm going to shade these so you can see them. Notice how the outer rim is very different than the inner rim. And it's different in at least three ways. The triangular shapes are very different in proportion and character. The curve of the first, we'll call this the first triangular shape, is laying back, and the next triangular shape is falling forward. The thicker part, as I've drawn it anyway, of that first one is on top. The thicker part is on the bottom for the second. This is a simple curve. This one is an S-curve. Notice how it's evolved and changed. They're all triangles, so it has something in common. And yet, as we move from one to one, it's still of a piece. In design, it's a triangle, but it's changed character in several ways. And so one of the mistakes we make is when we draw this C shape of the ear, or whatever contoured version of that, then we do the outer rim, then we do the inner rim. It starts to look a little bit like an unfinished bullseye. And it looks repetitive, and it's not believable because it hasn't evolved sufficiently from outer to inner rim. So when we look at any of these ears, we're going to notice that how the outer rim separates from the inner rim, and the inner rim from the ear canal is going to be a constant evolution. They're going to be distinctly different in character, outer to inner. And we want to pick that up very quickly in our design. Here you can see a little bit of the thickness of that lobe. Here's the outer rim. You can see we're in front of it, so it's thicker in front. The rim in front is thicker, and it's thinner, like paper thin in the back, evolving, changing. The outer rim is very close to the beginning of the inner rim, but the inner rim then falls way forward as it completes itself. I don't know if inner rims can complete themselves or we have to help them, but notice how each shape is similar and yet distinctly different. Notice that outer rim is kind of a broken triangle, like cardboard bending. And each time we add a new bit of detail, it has to feel like it's part of the same organic idea. and yet is in some ways unique and different. So that balance between the same yet different is critical. So pay attention to that. And then the last little bit of info I'll give you is I think of the ear as a C shape, usually skinnier at the earlobe, wider at the top outer rim, usually opened up into the cheek. That's why it's a C and not a circle or an oval. And then I want the outer rim to be kind of like a question mark. So a C or a reverse C, and a question mark or a reverse question mark. So I'm going to draw a C, then I'm going to draw a question mark. Then I'm going to draw another question mark. But I'm not going to separate out a little dot. I'm going to twist it into a last question mark, meaning just an S curve. And that'll give you the inner rim. And notice how I've let it fall forward. It's fallen away. It's a little closer together here. Farther away there. The outer rim is actually on top and overlaps the inner rim. The inner rim finishes and creates the hollow down into the ear canal. And then the little flap, the little ear flap right there, lays in front. This is down in the bowl. So I'll do that, and then I'll work to vary and oftentimes I'll use curves and corners together to vary them. But I'll want to make sure that this rim, this outer and the inner rim, varies quite a bit as it moves along. And then it usually fades off down here, and we pick up a little bit of the remainder of that tubular form. It usually fades off into the lobe, like so. Like so. And then within that, it can vary quite a bit. There's oftentimes a little hollow taken out here. So this ends up being a bit of a Y shape as it hollows out. You can see that Y shape hollowing out. But the main thing is to make it a big, simple idea. And if you're going to pick out the details, make sure that outer rim is hugging the contour. The inner rim falls down inside the contour, and each one is a little bit different. And when in doubt, simplify. You can just do that. You can do a little bit like that, which is more or less what Fetchin did. And then you can make it more and more distinct, discrete, complicated, but simpler, and get that big structure first before you lay in the smaller structures. And then even as I move along the journey of each rim, tracking this, tracking this, tracking this, I want it to vary and change and evolve in character one from the next. So it seems alive and unique and has grown organically and not mechanically. All right, so let's stop there.